There
Yeah,
we go.
yo, I was like, man, I was over here sweating bullets. Can you hear me okay?
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, yeah. You good?
Yeah, 1 second. Let me, for some reason this went off of my Bluetooth.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you sound good, man.
Okay, awesome. I can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. All right,
Technical difficulties, right?
man. We've had technical difficulties on every platform we've tried to use just now, and it's crazy.
It's
Uh,
just one of those days, I guess, right?
one of those days, man. One of those days. I'm glad to have you on, man.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate you reaching out for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, for those who are watching, this is the STEM Files, where we highlight the best and brightest of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in the Black community. I'm usually joined by my illustrious co-host, Jabrian Engineer, but he is traveling right now and is unable to join us this evening. So it's just going to be me flying solo with our special guest, uh, Maynard Okereke. Correct?
That is correct. Yes, Okereke.
Awesome,
Perfect.
awesome. So is there a now your moniker is the Hip Hop MD? Are you actually an MD?
No, I am not. My background is actually in civil environmental engineering. So I have my degree in civil engineering from University of Washington.
Okay, so
Uh, the hip
mhm.
the hip hop the hip hop MD is really just my moniker. One, because it flows well, um, and then you make that association with the science, right? So that's really just my character name, the hip hop MD.
Got you, got you. So for those who are watching, Mr. Maynard is a phenomenal educator in the sciences. He has been able to use hip hop and use hip hop culture and entertaining in terms of entertainment and combining entertainment with STEM education, and he's been phenomenally successful with it and extremely, extremely effective. Now, I use the word effective very, very carefully because science is often taught in very boring or ineffective ways, especially for young people.
Yes.
So I want to talk about being able to educate young people with and using entertainment as particularly as it relates to science. What motivated you? What made you want to do that? And why science? Why was science the reason for you combining entertainment with your education?
Yeah. Well, for me, music was always a passion of mine, right? I grew up hip hop artist, performing, being on stage. That was my roots and my core. That's something that I still do to this day. I'm big into entertainment work. I'm here in Los Angeles and Hollywood, so I'm in the heart of entertainment capital over here. And that was always my dream to, have my own show, be on television, be performing. And that was always my outlet, as a creative, that was always my creative outlet to be able to express myself. But at the same time too, I was always a science nerd. I was always into the sciences. Growing up, I was a big, Bill Nye fan, Nat Geo, Discovery Channel, like Animal Planet, like that was what I binge watched, So for me, and it was weird growing up because, those were like seemingly contrasting fields, right? It's like, you're not in hip hop circles necessarily talking about wildlife and space travel and stuff like that, So
Right.
it was always one of those elements where I felt I had to keep somewhat hidden and keep somewhat separate from everything else that I was doing. And I didn't like that, what I'm saying? As me as an authentic individual, I wanted to freely be able to talk about, all the different things I was involved in, regardless of how crazy or outlandish or completely distant they seemed, And I realized over time growing up, and especially when I started to talk to youth and I was mentoring other students and different things like that, I realized many other people were in that same boat where they felt education kind of was prohibitive as far as the things that they love to do, you know, the day-to-day things they're involved in, whether it was sports, entertainment, music. You always felt like you had to keep this certain bravado, you had to keep this kind of, you know, separate facade that was different than anything else, because that's kind of how it's always been presented to you, especially in
Right.
education. You always kind of like presented like you got to be professional. This is what you do, and you keep this separate from everything else. And I realized that that's not the way you learn. That's not what drives interest. You know, you want to make things relatable. You want to make things palatable so that you have a better understanding. And so that dynamic of really being able to infuse, you know, pop culture reference or fashion or comedy and infuse that into education is the perfect blend to really be able to stimulate and drive that attraction and drive that affinity for it, you know? And so that's really what I wanted to do with this hip hop science platform, was to be able to make people think while at the same time they're learning, you know? Even in music, right? There's always that kind of divide between like, you know, conscious rap and you know, and gangster rap or whatever. You know, there's always been kind of that divide, right? Where people like, I want to hear something that like really like moves me. And, you know, sometimes you just want to hear some stuff you can turn up to, you know, and
Yes.
and different artists kind of present that in different ways, you know.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, that's what needs to be in education as well too. You need to have that infusion of different things that kind of be able to set you off in different modes and really be able to make those connections that you wouldn't make. And so through the hip hop science platform, I really just use pop culture, you know, fun references that are, you know, up to date. I use, you know, entertainment, whether it be movie references, whether it be hip hop, because those are all the different things that we digest on a regular basis. And so those are the things that we should be using to help educate and be able to deliver that information to not only the youth, but to working professionals, everybody in every environment. You want to feel comfortable to be your true self in whatever environment that you are in and find those connections. And so that's really what I do through my hip hop science platform. And I think it's important for people to make that have that connectivity and to be able to translate those into different areas.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned connectivity, and you know, traditionally, as you mentioned before, there's a disconnect when it comes to science education in youth. Why do you think it is traditionally like that? Why is uh, science traditionally hard to understand generally, and why is it specifically geared that way towards youth? Why did they? I'm not going to say they, but why is uh, science education the one that's the hardest? Like, why is it? Why
Yeah.
specific? Why is it science?
I think it's because we've developed this natural phobia when it comes to the sciences, and I guess, you know, when I was keeping general STEM fields in general, right? So science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Um, we've kind of over time developed this natural phobia. It's almost kind of like, you know, fear of spiders and different things, right? If you grow up and everybody's like, oh my God, spiders are creepy and blah blah blah, and you anytime you interact with a spider, you're going to remember that. That's going to plant that seed of fear, you know. But if you grow up and your spiders are all around you and you're handling spiders and, you know, and they're a natural thing to you, you're going to grow up with that natural premise like, oh yeah, this is everyday spider. It's not going to do anything to me. I know it's not going to bite me if I don't do whatever. Same thing with snakes or whatever other phobias that are out there. The more and more that you are around it and you interact with it and it becomes a part of everyday life, then that fear goes away, right? And it's the same thing that I believe with the STEM fields, because especially growing up, and at least from my background, you kind of growing up with this perception that you have to be this genius, that you have to have like, you know, perfect scores on your SATs, and you have to become a Nobel Prize winner, and that's the only way that you're going to understand these different scientific elements, right? And even terminology that we use, like, oh, when people say, oh, it's not rocket science, right? In order to describe something that should be simple, you make this contrast because you're like, oh, rocket science is this extraordinary field that's like that's unattainable, that nobody can understand, and you
Right.
got quantum mechanics and everything like that. And so we have these kind of built-in phobias where we think that science is so out of our reach, and that gets translated down to our youth, you know, as that's they're being taught these different things every day that they don't have the understanding, or that they can't gain that understanding, or that they'll never pick up on different things like their peers are, you know. and everybody, you all know, everybody learns at different rates. Like I was never the quickest learner. I had to like put time and energy into everything that I learned, even to this day. Um, but we kind of get implanted this seed of doubt that we can't do this and that it's unattainable. And I really think that's what puts us in jeopardy, that what puts us in harm, especially as Black people. We are already kind of made to feel inferior in so many ways. And then when we see other people accomplishing things, or we see other people getting opportunities that we might not be afforded, then we also, that further like puts this seed of doubt that, oh, we can't be like them, because not only am I Black, but there's no way I can be that smart enough. There's no way I'll be accepted into this institution. There's no way I'll get this scholarship, you know. So you get this doubt that infiltrates us, and then that gets passed down and passed down. And really, if we now start to educate and tell people like science is a table, there's science in everything that's around us. Like I did this session this week on how to make STEM education entertaining and engaging. And that was one of the principles that I talked about, is in order to really get that phobia and get that stigma out of students' minds, you have to showcase them that science isn't everything, and that you are a scientist no matter what you do. Even if you're a cosmetologist and you're doing hair and makeup, there's a science behind that. You know, you have to understand the mixture of chemicals and how heat affects hair. You know what I'm saying? Because the certain amount of heat can make make your hair brittle, or cause fatigue. You know, if you're into like makeup, you got to understand how certain makeup affects the skin and break out. Those are elements of science, you know, and a lot of times we don't make that association. We think a scientist is only somebody in this lab coat mixing chemicals and talk about quantum mechanics and physics and stuff. You know, we don't make that day-to-day application of things that we do in normal day-to-day life. And I think once we get to that point where we now have that understanding, like, oh, the things that I do on a day-to-day basis are like the decision that I made this morning, the food that I ate, the caffeine that I ate that gave me energy. That's a form of chemical energy. Even the decision process of me deciding that I don't think I'm a scientist, you're right there. You're using the scientific method to break that down. You know, so I
Right.
try to infuse this knowledge and this understanding that everything that you do, you're utilizing a form of science. So that makes you a scientist. And that's what I always tell, especially students, when I'm working with students that are like, oh, I can never do this. I'm like, no, you're a scientist. Like, tell me something right now that you did today. Well, when I'll break down how that was a science element related to that. And once you make that connection and once they understand that, then that stigma and that fear becomes less and less over time. And then they can eventually pass it down. They can feel more comfortable navigating these fields. And so that's what I hope to do with my platform. And that's why I feel my platform has been great, is really now making it palatable and understanding, so that they make that association with everything that they do in their day-to-day life. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, man, you're doing a phenomenal job, man. And for those who are watching, once again, this is the STEM Files, where we highlight the best and brightest in the Black community in terms of STEM talent. Um, my name is Tariq Muhammad, aka Tariq Cardiac. I'm usually joined by my co-host, Jabrain Engineer. Like I mentioned before, he is away on
Mm-hmm.
travel and couldn't be here with us this evening, but he's definitely here with us in spirit. As a matter of fact, his energy is so big that he's right here right now. You know, so he's
I
definitely.
feel it. I feel
Oh yeah,
it.
oh yeah. Trust me. When we have you back on the show and when he's on here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Absolutely, absolutely. And shout out to
We'll keep manifesting that same energy for him.
oh, most
Mhm.
def, most def. And shout out to Jeff Harford, kind of grew up with bro. What's up, man? It's good to see you. Um, I want to, go a little bit further back. Let's go back to the origins of things. You talked about those built-in phobias. Where did they come
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Who or what entity was the originator of uh, building this stigma or building this wall between Black people and science? What was that? What was that
Mm-hmm.
initial uh, uh, mode of operation, so to speak? And
Mm-hmm.
how has that demonstrated itself over the years in terms of how uh, other groups of people have used science to treat Black and brown people of the planet?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. That's a really loaded question, because I mean there's so much that's jam packed into that, right? I mean, you can go back hundreds and hundreds of years through slavery and imperialism and all these different things, right? Like it traces back to back to back. So I'll just touch on like let's just touch on over just this past century, right?
Right.
And you've seen, we already know, this is just kind of assuming that everybody kind of knows these racial dynamics that have always been in play, especially, we'll just talk about just the US here, right? Racial dynamics have always been in play, from slavery to Jim Crow. There's always been a racial dynamic that's affected us in different ways than our counterparts, right? And
Right.
so you already put that into place now, right? Where you're already separated, you're already made to feel inferior. And then what happens is over time, we've been stripped of so many different things, especially within the science community. Um, so many of the efforts that we made, early scientists, you look like George Washington Carver, profound impacts in the scientific world, and how some of their findings and some of the things that they did were either overlooked or stolen or taken, right? Or worse, not taught to other Black people, right? So you grow up, you go to your science classes as a kid, and I know for me personally, growing up, and you're doing history classes and all these different things like that. I'm not being taught about the contributions of George Washington Carver. You know what I'm saying? You're getting told specific things that institutionalized education is relaying to you. These messages that are relaying to you, who developed this technology or who did this that had an impact on the world. You're not being shown these Black contributors, these Black inventors, these Black scientists, right? And so we grow up without a lack of with a lack of understanding about who affected the different things that we do and who contributed to some of the greatest advancements that we have in life at this current time. And so that's one element. Um, and then you have so many other elements going on. Especially recently, this past couple of months with everything happening with racial injustice, there's been a big movement in the STEM community of highlighting different things, ways Black people have been affected culturally, specifically within the sciences, right? We've had issues tracing back to like the 1950s, studies that were done where Black people were used, right, to actually do these physical studies. And records either were kept or they were biological tests were being done. You had everything with the euthanization and all these different things happening, right? That affected us. That tests and studies were done for the greater good of the world, but that understanding of we were contributors of that, and we were main factors in making that happen, and that wasn't highlighted. You have all those different things going on, right? So you have years and years and years, centuries of just this kind of oppression and this doubt and this lack of understanding and wherewithal that we are huge factors within this scientific revolution of society. And all those really snowballed into where we're at now today of this lack of understanding and awareness and not feeling included within these STEM fields. And so that seed of doubt continues to fester and fester and plant itself generation after generation. And we grow up not feeling that we're part of this field, not feeling that we made any contributions to the scientific community. And that seed has just continued to develop and nurture. And we need to get to a point now where we can really understand, hey, this is exactly how this seed was planted. Let's resoil this, twist it up, reshape it, show people that there's new ways of growth and that we are playing a vital role in how the future is going to come out. And so I think all of those are factors that kind of play into this transgression that's happened over time. And it's really affected our belief and our understanding about what our position is with the sciences.
Mm. Right on point, bro. Right on point. Before we continue, I want to make sure that for those who are watching, this is usually done simultaneously on the STEM Files page as well as my page. But if you would like to know more about the STEM Files and what we do and what our ultimate goal is, go ahead and visit us on our social media, YouTube, The STEM Files. STEM is all caps, then Files. Uh, on Facebook, and then on Instagram is at the STEM Files. So definitely tune in for our other episodes. Go ahead and watch our old ones and get more acquainted with the STEM Files. Now, I want to go a little bit more into your roots in science. It mentions that you are a civil engineer. Now, mind you, um, when I was initially introduced to your content, I never thought you were an engineer. I thought you were actually a biologist or a chemist of the sort. That's just the kind of vibe that your page gives off. Tell us a little bit more about your engineering background. What made you decide to go into engineering, specifically civil engineering, and how has the journey been with your current brand now as it relates to civil engineering?
Yeah. So it was actually a pretty crazy journey getting into engineering. It wasn't my first choice. Right before I went to college, my goal was to be a wildlife scientist. I wanted to go into wildlife biology. I was always big into nature, exploring ecosystems, and how animals interact with the
Hey,
ecosystems.
bro,
And that was always
your voice is kind of going in and out.
like going in and out.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
yeah, that's better.
Okay. Um, yeah, no, I originally wanted to go into wildlife biology. That was my first passion. And I was always really interested in how animals interacted with their ecosystems and their environments. And so I went to college with that kind of mindset. And while I was in school, got involved in NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. For those that don't know, shout out to NSBE. Um, and I started to meet a lot of peers that were interested in the science fields and going into engineering, people that looked like me. And that kind of set my foundation and my belief like, oh, there's a lane within this. And, along with loving, wildlife and biology and all that, I also was always big into building and structures and architecture and stuff like that, right? And so engineering, and especially civil and environmental engineering, kind of fits that mold where I was able to kind of make that connection between ecology and buildings and how structures affected us and how we needed to really design the world around us. So engineering was that kind of perfect merger of those different contrasting areas. And then also too, everybody was at that time was telling me, go into engineering, that's where the money is. You got to go to where the money is. And you're in college, you're trying to you want to make sure you get out of college, you got yourself a job and you're financially set. And everybody's like, yeah, if you go into environmental, wildlife, right, like you ain't gonna make no money in that field. Like you got to go to where the money is at. And so that was kind of my mindset going into engineering. And so I graduated with an engineering degree, and I actually worked with an engineering firm after I graduated. This firm called Turner Construction, and we did a lot of heavy infrastructure projects. So I was building high rises, data centers, did the Nintendo headquarters in Seattle, the rental car facility in Seattle, a bunch of Microsoft projects, a lot of condominium projects, renovations on the UW football stadium. And so I did a lot of like really dope complex projects, and I was a project engineer for them, and it was great. I loved it. But that job just never fueled me, especially after how it is after you graduate, right? Your mindset is while you're in school is like you're doing tests, preparing for this, boom, boom. And then you got this, and you got
Right.
another, and then you graduate, and you're like, oh, I'm done. Like I don't got no tests to study for. I got no quarters I got to get ready for. I'm on my own. I'm paying rent. I'm living my life. I'm like everything that I want to do is in my hands now. And now you get revealed to this whole new world, right? This whole new landscape that you have to traverse. And it becomes kind of complex. And you're like, is this what like the rest of life is going to be? Like, this is what I do now? And for me, it was a really wake up call to go back to what I love, because I started working every single day and I was working with this company and it became such a monotonous process. Like I was the same thing every day. I go to work, I do this, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing exciting about what I was doing, and I prepared so much to get to this position. It's like, yeah, I was making good money and all this, but it didn't fuel me. I didn't feel like I was changing the world. I didn't feel like I was making an impact. I didn't feel like I had the ability to be creative and I wanted that. And for me, I'm always a risk taker. I'm always going to go after what I'm passionate about. And I always tell people when you find your passion, it becomes your purpose, and you can no longer be passive. And so at that time, I wasn't passionate about it. So I felt I didn't have a purpose, and I wanted to have a purpose with everything that I did. And so I left the engineering field, and I did the whole drive down to LA in my whip with no plan, really not really knowing exactly what the future laid. But I knew that I was committed. I knew I had dedication, and I knew I was resourceful, and I was going to make something happen. And so I drove out here, and I've been on the grind ever since. And life kind of takes you towards weird paths. You know, they always kind of talk about that one kind of chart where it's like, oh, everybody thinks success is like this, and like, no, success is like this. You
All
know,
over.
sometimes you and then until you go all the way down, it's all over the place, right?
Right.
Um, and that's really how my life has been since I left engineering. It's been lots of ups and downs and discovery and redefining myself and reevaluating and luckily I've been able to find a way to be able to compile everything that I've loved, everything that I've done in my life to now have this platform, which has kind of snowballed into what it is. So that's kind of been the crazy journey of getting to where I'm at now with this platform.
Got you, got you. Yeah, man. And like I said earlier on in the show, man, you're doing a great job. And showing people that you have to have purpose with what you do. And in science, is really it's easy to not be purposeful in science. There's a whole lot of frivolous work going on in science and in research that it may be important to the person doing it, but to the bigger picture and to the overall advancement of human life, it's just not there. Unless you're
Mhm.
doing something very specific and you have a very very strong hold on what it is you want your science to do for people. But
Mhm.
before we get into any other questions, I have one question from the audience. Can you
Yeah.
just real quick explain to individuals what civil engineering is, what it encompasses, and what is the educational track to become a civil engineer? And then we'll go ahead and get into this question from the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Civil engineering really is how you apply engineering principles for things that affect humanity and civilization. And so civil engineering can include road development, right? Because as humans, we need roads to transport things. We need roads as source of transportation for us to be able to get around and navigate the world around us, right? And so civil engineering involves road development. Civil engineering involves obviously buildings and architecture and construction because as humans we need places to live, right? And that's our impact on the environment is the fundamental structures that are around us that we need to survive, right? And so it's all the things that they consider civil, which is humanity, and civilization, things that impact us as humans that directly affect our environment. So that's kind of what civil engineering encompasses. I focused on the structural side, building side. Some people do the road development. Some people, they tie the environmental side in because that has to deal with ecology, right? The effects that we have on the environment from doing the things like road development or building development, how that impacts the environment around us, the human interaction with our environment. So that's why civil environmental engineering is tied together. Um, the path really involves a lot of math. A ton of math. I think somebody said in here, I'm looking at it, it involves a lot of math. Um, for sure. I took math literally every single quarter that I was in school. All the 5 years I was because I did another 50 year because there was so much that I couldn't get through, you know. And I had to retake a couple classes, you know. So it took me 5 years to graduate. Um, but
Wow.
a lot of math, a lot of engineering courses in my school. I think it's a little different for some schools, but you have to do your prerequisites and then apply to the engineering department. So you have to do these list of prerequisites first, and then once those prerequisites are done, then you can apply to the engineering department. That's why it took me 5 years because it took me a lot of time to get through those prerequisites, you know, and I didn't want to burn myself out. So I tried to make a good balance of courses just so I could be able to get through each quarter without killing myself, right?
Right.
And uh, and so you have to do prerequisites that apply to your department. So your grades have to be good enough to get into the department. Then once you're in the department, then all your courses are all engineering related. So I did everything from aeronautics engineering classes to environmental principles to structures and structural analysis uh, to soils and how understanding the soil and soil impact and how that affects geology and everything like that affects structures. So you do all those heavy engineering principle design kind of classes for 2 years before you finish and get your degree. So it's definitely a process. It's not easy. It's pretty complex, but it's one of those fields where you get a wide range of different scientific understandings in a wide array of areas, which is pretty cool.
Got it, got it. So we have a question from Salima Shabazz. Is it too late to go into engineering or to go to school for engineering at age 45? She's asking.
It's never it's never too late to do anything in life, right? It's never too late. I always tell people like we said earlier, right? When you find your passion becomes your purpose, and you can no longer be passive. Sometimes what you find what you're passionate about when you're young, right? There you got some 5-year-old entrepreneurs out here in these streets that are like starting businesses, right? You got people, yeah, you got teenagers that are developing apps and becoming millionaires and billionaires every day, you know. But then at the same time, you got people that don't break wave until they're in their 40s, you know. It takes time, you know, and everybody, like I said, this path to success is not straight. It's up and down. It's all over the place. So if you're 45 and you think that, hey, engineering is the route that I want to go to, this is where I'm going to make my impact, and this is something that fuels me and that I'm interested in, go ahead and dive in. I remember I was when I was in school, I remember I had way older people there, but it was probably somebody that was in his 40s at that time in class, you know, and we didn't look at him any different, you know. He understood what he wanted to go after, and he went after it, you know. So it's never too late to go after what you're passionate about.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you mentioned that your success story, there's no set path to success, and that it depends on a variety of different factors. And you mentioned that you have some young people, children, teenagers who are millionaires. You know, and one of the things that influences how successful you become is support from family. You
Yep.
know, with those young people, most of them who are developing apps or becoming millionaires at such young ages before they're 18 years old, most of them have very, 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 very supportive families, parents, and or other mentors or what have you that are creating an environment for them to be that creative and be that entrepreneurial. Can you go into how important support is, and where did your support system come from, and where does it currently come from?
Yeah. No, support is huge. We all need it, and I think especially us as Black people, we need that support more than anything because
Yes.
um, a lot of times, unfortunately, we don't have either mentors or parents that are navigated those fields, right? So we don't have people that look like us, right? So representation is key. I know growing up, I didn't have mentors or other scientists in my family or anything like that, so I never knew that was the trajectory. I never knew there was a possibility and opportunity in those areas. Um, my parents personally, for me, have been always supportive of whatever move that I've always made, because they knew that I made good decisions and that I would always go after what I truly loved. And I wasn't just making random brash choices. It was always well thought out. So they were always supportive in the moves that I made. Um, but I think for me, one of the things that helped me the most, especially navigating the sciences, was having peers, people that looked like me, that were either in the same class or same age range, that were also like going through the same pitfalls and trying to navigate that I was, because then we're able to bounce ideas off of each other. We can stimulate each other. We can motivate each other. We can help each other push through situations. And I think for me, that was the biggest support that I had navigating the sciences, because I didn't have Black teachers. I didn't have Black people in my family that were in the sciences. I didn't have anybody that I could look up to and be like, oh, that's necessarily the path. Um, and so we had to navigate it ourselves. And I think that's why it's really important for our youth coming up that we, do what you're doing with the STEM Files platform, showcasing Black people in these positions, right? People that are watching can now see a vision, they can see an opportunity, they can see a path that they can mimic that can help them navigate their own world, their own lane as well too. And I think that representation is important for us to not only see but also to be, so that other people that are coming up now have something that they look towards and look at as a realistic pathway to be able to now explore and get into the STEM fields.
Mm. Yes, definitely. I totally agree. Um, and before I go into my next question, I'm going to go ahead and ask. This one's also from Salima Shabazz. What advice can you give those who feel like they don't have the support? Because I'm gonna tell you this right now. My family has always supported um, everything I've ever done, or everything I've wanted to do. And
Mhm.
there may have been individuals that didn't see it because of where I was in my life at that time.
Yeah,
But as I grew into what I wanted to do with my life, they started to support. They saw that because I was in that situation or in that particular area in my life at the time, they saw that that wasn't going to stop me from pursuing my goals on my visions on the things that I wanted
yeah,
to do in my life. I didn't see that as an obstacle. But let's speak to the individuals that may feel like they don't have any support. They feel it's non-existent. No matter who they talk to, they cannot garner the support that they would like to encourage them to go further in their endeavors.
yeah. I would say if you don't feel like you have the support, um, it's gonna have to come internally, right? You're gonna have to stay curious. You're gonna have to keep asking questions. And I have this kind of segment where I talk about curiosity as nature's PhD, and I think it's an important philosophy for people to understand because, like you even mentioned, right, when you looked at my page initially, you thought that you probably assumed that I was, into biology or had like some like or some kind of wildlife kind of science background or whatever. Um, but that not only is that what I'm like kind of area that I'm passionate about and I love, but even all areas of other science that I talk about. I do everything from physics to space to technology and coding. Also, I touch on a lot of different areas, but that's because I ask questions. I'm curious. I do research. I before pre Corona, I was out in the streets like going to science events, sitting down with scientists, going to seminars and sessions, and like doing this like heavy research and just asking questions and showing up. A lot of times I'd show up as the hip hop MD to let people know about my platform. I'd learn about so many different things in so many different areas. And that curiosity, that drive to stay curious and keep asking questions, helped fuel me because then through that I was able to find mentors, I was able to find supporters because I was inquisitive and I kept asking questions and I kept wanting to navigate. So if you feel like you don't have supporters or people that have already got your back, but you know that this is a field or lane that you want to do, it's up to you now to ask those questions, get yourself in those doors, and stimulate that thought, stimulate those responses, and let people know what it is that you care about, what you want to know. The more that people know what it is that you want to do and what moves you, you will easily now start to find people that are in that same wavelength as you, right? They you People, you're certain people that you attract what you want to be, right? And so if you want to get into those fields, this is something that you want to navigate, you're going to find people that are going to be supportive in that by you just being out there and being there and voicing it, what you want to do, and putting it out there in the world. And so I think that's the big thing. Stay curious, and that curiosity is going to open up lots of doors for you.
Facts, facts. For those who are watching, yes, just stay curious. Curiosity is going to be like you said, the door. Matter of fact, it's going to be the key to open the door, and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you come out on top in whatever it is that you're looking to do. This episode is entitled Hip Hop Science, and we didn't really get. We've been on the air for about 35, 40 minutes now, but we really didn't get a chance to go into um, hip hop and some of the correlations that you see in hip hop as it relates to science. What aspects of hip hop and just what parts of hip hop were you able to use to fuse with science to get a bigger picture to your audience and using it to further the goal of science, which is to not just dump a bunch of chemicals in a flask, but it's really to take one generation into the next. So how were you
Yeah.
able to, you know, uh, pick apart hip hop, pick apart entertainment, and use it for science? What were the correlations?
Yeah. Man, lots of different avenues, really. I know for me, like the platform when I really, the first kind of segments that I started putting out there that kind of made that fusion was really dissecting lyrics within songs, right? And so I'd find different lyrics in songs and we talk about curiosity. the what sets it off in my head is like asking the question, right? And so I think one of the very first videos that I did um, was I broke down this Rick Ross song, and I think the lyric in there was something simple. It wasn't even necessarily a direct science related. I can't remember the exact song it was, but he made reference to having a house next to Oprah, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was I remember that was the line that kind of sparked this whole kind of hip hop science thing, because I was just remember just sitting there listening, right? When I listen to music, I listen to music, right? I'm the type that like I listen to lyrics, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I grew up on Wu Tang, you know.
Right.
I'm a big J Cole, Kendrick Lamar guy, you know what I'm saying? Jay-Z, Eminem, you know, those are like, you know, those are my roots, right? And so I'm all about lyrics and flow and riding the beat. So I listen to music, right?
Right.
Um, and so I'm listening to this track. I'm like, house next to Oprah, and the way my brain is always on some other. I'm always on something different, right? So I started to think about like Oprah, and at that time there was some articles on Oprah's net worth and her being a billionaire and all these different things, right? So I'm like, Oprah's a billionaire. Like, how much money does Rick Ross actually have? And I started like, dude, I get into this whole like Google history of just researching stuff and dive into this whole wormhole of like fact checking and all these different things. And it really started out as kind of like a fact check, like, okay, let's find out what Rick Ross's net worth is and how much money would he have to actually have in order to be able to have a house next to Oprah. And I did this whole like breakdown about this mansion that he lives on, and and how and breaking down the acreage of his mansion and how many of those mansions would equivalent could be equivalent to Oprah's net worth and all these different things. So I broke down this like math equation, uh, what his true worth was, his true value. And so that's kind of how these kind of snowballed. It really is asking these questions and then diving into how do you actually figure that out, like breaking down the equations. And so my first kind of videos started out like that, kind of as a fact check. And then over time, it either became more complex or became more reference based. Up to the point like now, like this past week, I did a session. I have this partnership that I do with Texas Instruments, and I did like a live session with some of the students, and we were talking about like quantum mechanics, right? And like what is quantum mechanics and understanding quantum mechanics and how light behaves as a wave and a particle. And we talked about this whole like wave particle duality. And this is like middle school kids, right? So we're trying to keep it not too complex, but you want to get them to understand kind of the generalizations of stuff. And I made a reference to think of lights like Drake, right? Drake can sing, he can rap, or he can
Right.
sing and rap at both the same time, right? Like, so you break down different songs where he's singing and rapping in the same verse or the same song. And just that like switch where you make that analogy to something that they get and they understand, uh, then it sets them off like, oh, that's how light behaves as a wave and a part. Because when sometimes you're thinking about it, and it seems so complex, like you're thinking about waves and particles and photons and how you're looking at the split test that was done in the early 19th century, where they had to split photons through these little slits in order to be able to discover the behavior of light. And sometimes you think of it as complex, like how can light do this or do that, and blah, blah, blah. And then you make that simple analogy or that simple comparison, and then it's like now every single time they hear a Drake song, they're thinking of quantum mechanics and they're thinking about physics, and that's kind of the trajectory that I hope to accomplish with this platform, is like using those type of analogies, using those references to where now you make a connection to something that's already innate, something that's you have a fundamental understanding of, that's around you, that you hear or listen to or watch every day. Could be movie references, because I do a lot of like pop culture entertainment stuff. So it could be like tying something into a movie or a show or whatever. And then you make that switch because now you tie it into something that's relatable and something that you digest on a regular basis. And so now that connection stays with you and you have a more fundamental understanding of that topic or that content that you're trying to work on. So those are like simple things that I do day to day on my platform, whether it's analogies or references or just being humorous, right? A lot of times we think of science as just dry. somebody that's just sitting there at a chalkboard, or now we're in this virtual age, right? So you got somebody that's on the Zoom feed and just talking or showing a PowerPoint slide, and it's not interesting, it's not engaging. I want to be engaging. I want to be able to talk different. I want to be able to be who I am and be this new representation, somebody that understands them and talk to them in a different way. And so all those kind of conform together in order to present how I communicate my knowledge of science to especially not just youth, but to young professionals, people that are navigating different spaces, to be able to make that connection, have that better and deeper fundamental understanding.
Got you. Now, I'm not a Drake fan. I don't rock with him like that, but I see what you're saying. I definitely see
Yeah.
what yeah, man, I definitely am into the same kind of artist, man. I think DMX is one of the most underrated uh, artists of all time.
Oh yeah.
Definitely one of the best. And no one seems to talk about him anymore, but he just did a verses with Snoop Dogg. So just to kind of veer off a little bit into entertainment. This isn't a science question, but I know you're very passionate about hip hop, very passionate about music. Who would be your ideal versus battle between two hip hop artists?
Oh, wait, say that again. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear the last one.
Who would be your ideal versus battle? What would be your ideal versus battle between two hip hop artists? Who would you like to?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Um, the best versus battle today. That's a good one. I'm trying to make sure I'm not going to state anybody that's already done a versus battle.
It has
Um, but
been a lot.
huh?
Hasn't been too many.
Yeah. I would say a really good one. Ooh, um, I would say. Oh, this would actually be an interesting one. I'm just kind of just thinking. I'm thinking big, and then I'm going to kind of break down to other areas. Um, if Jay-Z and Eminem did a versus battle, that shit would be pretty entertaining.
Oh
That'd
yeah,
be entertaining.
but their catalogs alone, they can be going all day.
They could
All
go all day on on catalogs for
yeah.
sure, all day.
I'm biased
Um,
to Jay Z because I'm from New York, but I
yeah.
can tell you for it's gonna be close. It's gonna be close, but I think just hit for hit, I think Jay Z has had more hits, in terms of like that top 10 or that number one kind of more than Eminem.
Hmm.
They think about how many albums Jay Z has had versus Eminem, how many number one albums, how many. I don't think Jay Z's ever done a bad album. All the way
Yeah.
from Reasonable Doubt to now, all his albums
Hmm.
have been number one, top notch. Whereas Eminem, I'm not saying he's had good albums, but he hasn't had the
Hmm.
longevity that Jay Z has had.
Hmm.
Eminem took a break for a long time dealing with personal issues. So,
Hmm.
I think Jay Z has a little bit more. But if they do it 20 for 20, it should be a
Hmm.
good battle.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's always interesting in these versus battles, right? Because a lot of times our mind goes to who had like the chart topping tracks or whatever, But
Yeah.
a lot of times I just think about like the B-side tracks, you know what I'm saying? That like the ones that you love, but
Yeah.
maybe weren't like Billboard top 10 type tracks. Those are the ones that I like to see them play when they do these versus battles, right? And really kind of break it down. And the interesting thing too about the versus battles is that it's also an opportunity for you to kind of get dissect a little bit, get to know the artists, some stories, some history that went in behind these songs, right? And there's such a dynamic between that, the conversations that come up, and I think between Jay-Z and Eminem, they'd have a lot of interesting conversations to really be able to dissect, regarding the history of the songs. So I think that would be really dope.
Definitely, definitely. All right, so we're gonna get back on track here. This is gonna be our final question for the evening because we try not to go into the hour territory or over an hour. Because once people see that 45 minutes, 60 minutes, that's when people are like, okay, is there like pieces of this interview I can watch? No, people are not interested in watching long videos. But so this is the final question.
Yeah.
This is from Jabri Engineer. He is my co-host, who could not be with us here this evening. I'm gonna get on him about that. But now let me stop. So his question is, what is the average reaction you get from young people you interact with through your platforms? Do you maintain communication with any of the any mentees or program participants? Have you seen improvement in grades or increased STEM engagement after their participation in your programs or sessions?
Hmm.
Let me let
Nice.
me
That's
let me
good. That's
parse it.
good.
Yeah, let me break that. We can do that one by one. So, for the first part is, what is the average reaction you get from young people who interact with you on your platform?
Yeah. It's a great reaction. I think a lot of times through my platform, I generally tend to get more so educators and people that appreciate my content and want to use it to now teach. Um, and I know that's been kind of the recent history with some of the stuff that I do. Like I just did a session this week where I did a hour-long presentation of how to make STEM education entertaining and engaging for high school educators, specifically to reach high school students. And so sometimes I have segments that are tailored towards that, assisting the educators, and then sometimes I speak directly to the youth either through like workshops, other engagements. I'm going to be doing this SciFest event next month. We're going to be having a presentation talking to youth, and I'm probably going to put together a video, maybe doing some of the backyard science stuff that I do. Um, but the youth always love it because they typically don't see somebody that looks like me on camera doing this type of content or talking about these different things. And it keeps their interest, right? It keeps them engaged, keeps them invested, right? Because they're not just listening to somebody do this dull presentation. They see me as a character, so just my get up alone, my lab coat and headphones and kind of quirky, personality or whatever. It's something different that they feel that they are able to engage with and have fun with. And then on top of that, they're learning stuff, and I'm able to present things in new, interesting ways. So that connection that they're able to make really kind of takes it over the edge, and that's why they, maintain that interest. And that's why I believe a lot of platforms have been reaching out to me to either talk to their students or to be able to provide opportunities for their educators to learn from me. And I think that's been probably the most fulfilling part about this is knowing that I'm making an impact on the students' lives for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually, I plan on reaching out to you very soon. We have a invention and innovation workshops coming up, and I
Mhm.
would love to see how we can partner on that to get some additional content to go along with what we already have to make it a little bit more exciting for our younger listeners. But we'll talk
Mhm.
about that later on. So
Most
the
def.
second part of the question is: do you maintain communication with any mentees or program participants? I think you kind of answered that a little bit, but can you go a little bit more into that? Like, do you maintain
Uh,
relationships?
yeah, yeah, and honestly too, a lot of what I do right now is evolving as of recently. It was really the beginning of this year that my platform really kind of started to take off, especially with everything happening with this pandemic and virtual learning now in play. There was this switch now that everybody had to go to, like, oh, we got to find more digital content.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've been able to thrive as of recently, because I've already been doing this digital content. I've already been able to have these, whether it's youth stuff on YouTube, on my Instagram, where I'm creating engaging visuals or photos of different topics. Now these are tools that people are now looking for, and so a lot of kind of recent because of this need for virtual education kind of
Bro, your
and so
mic is going in and out.
oh, the last thing I said.
The last thing you said was, well, I can't remember because it was kind of it cut off and then it came back and I couldn't remember what I last heard.
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just saying, as of recently, with this need for virtual education and virtual learning opportunities, that's where I've been really thriving right now, is because now educators and other platforms are looking for unique voices, looking for unique ways to be able to stimulate engagement. And so even just definitely over the past 5 months, there's been a huge wave spike of the things that I've been doing, the content that I've been doing, partnerships. Like I said, I have a partnership right now with Texas Instruments. I did this Champions for Science event yesterday. I got the SciFest LA event coming up. I got some other STEM festivals coming up. And so far, even just like with some of my previous partnerships, like with the Natural History Museum, I've had an ongoing relationship with them. So all their new, before this virus came out, all their new exhibits that were opening up, I had the opportunity to go and do vlogs for them and be able to highlight different unique features about their exhibit. And they would use that to share on their platform. And so we've had a continued relationship where now could be students that are visiting the Natural History Museum. I'm able to reach directly to that audience. And so I've had opportunities like that with organizations that I've worked with to continue to either give them content or for them to use my content to reach their audiences. And so that's really where my ongoing engagement has been. And then as of right now that I'm doing a lot of this work with these different STEM organizations, the goal would be to make this a continuous partnership where if they're doing monthly events or like this Dexter homeschool event that I'm about to do, they're doing live stream events every week, and so I'm going to be doing live streams for them. And so that's a continuous way to be able to now engage to the students within that community on a regular basis. So those are things that are still in development right now, is kind of fostering that relationship and finding ways to have ongoing curriculums or ongoing events using my platform that the students can connect with.
Awesome, awesome. Wow, this is definitely a this has been a wonderful show. And I know Jabril, who's watching. We definitely can't wait to work with you and getting some content
Likewise.
there and partnering with each other and lending our individual expertise to each other's work. You know,
Mhm.
we are Black men in STEM, and it's important that we show those who are not in STEM or young people interested in STEM that Black men are unified in science too. You know, so
Yes.
we definitely plan on working with you and what you're doing. How can
Yes,
people get
definitely.
up there? How can people contact you to learn more about what you do?
Yeah, it's real easy. You find me at Hip Hop Science Show on all platforms, mostly on Instagram and YouTube. I also have my website, hiphopscienceshow.com. And I post a lot of stuff to my website whenever I have different opportunities coming up, teaching opportunities or whatever. But I'm pretty active on all those different platforms. And then if you want to ever reach me, my email is always accessible. I've had people emailing me about different workshop opportunities and whatnot. So this is my lane. This is what I do now, and it's fun for me. So look out! I got plenty of new videos and content. I try to put stuff out on a regular basis, and so you can't miss me. I'm using a crazy lab coat, my headphones and glasses. So pretty.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're definitely one of a kind on that, man. And I respect your image. I respect everything you're doing. And for those who are watching, if you'd like to know more about the STEM Files, just go ahead and visit us on Instagram at the STEM Files, the STEM Files as well on Facebook and YouTube. This video will be uploaded to YouTube. So for those of you who usually watch us on YouTube, this video will be there between now and tomorrow. Um, Once again, Maynard, thank you so much for joining us tonight. As I said, I don't want to keep you too long into the evening. We don't believe in long, drawn out 2, 3, 4 hour shows. We want to make sure that we have a lot of information being retained. You know, so thank you so much again, man. Can you hear me?
Oh, last person.
I said thank you again for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Yes. Yes, no, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on this platform. This is awesome. Like you said, we need more of us doing this work, and I'm glad that more of us are starting to find each other and partner with each other because I think for a time we always kind of felt like we were kind of doing our own thing in these spaces, and so it's
Yeah.
good to know that there are brothers like us out here doing this good work. So I'm happy to connect with you guys, and I look forward to staying connected.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again. And for those who are watching, this has been another episode of the STEM Files where we highlight the best and brightest in science and technology in the Black and Brown community. I'm your host, Tariq Cardiac. You can find me on Instagram at Tariq Cardiac. I'm a biomedical research scientist with a concentration in cardiovascular pathobiology, which is pretty much the study of how diseases form in the heart and blood vessels. So, and my co-host Jabril, he's a materials engineer, well, mechanical engineer with the United States Navy, dealing with a lot of material analysis. I can't go into what he does in detail, so I'm gonna leave that for him to do. But
I'm gonna have to talk with Jabril on that because I actually I did an internship with the Naval Shipyard in Seattle when I was in school. I did a nuclear engineering internship. So I was a nuclear engineer for a time being. We were doing material and structural analysis on submarines for the Navy
yeah,
for years. So yeah, that's dope. We all on these same lanes out here. That's dope.
you just helped me out. That's part of what he does. So I'm glad you as an engineer know exactly where I was coming from with that. And but yeah, he trust and believe he'll be reaching out, and if not, I'm gonna make sure that you guys have each other's contact information. He said mechanical engineer with their background in material science and engineering. So yeah, I was right. I was along those lines, you know. But I love my brother. He's definitely a good person to know and work with. But like I said, once again, this has been the STEM Files. We appreciate you. Our next show will feature Rolando Lyles, who is a biotech, who's in, well, the proper term is a biological sciences in the biotech industry that way. And he mainly deals with cancer research. So he'll definitely be on the show this Saturday, August 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern time hopefully it'll be on our standard platform with all of our logos and overlays and intros, because we didn't have nothing, but we made up for with the amazing conversation we had. But once again, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Maynard. We hope to have you back soon.
Thanks.
All right. Good night, everyone.